Have you ever had a moment at work where you had to choose between your job and your principles? For Ava Mitchell, a 24-year-old waitress drowning in debt, that choice came in the form of Preston Sterling Jr., the arrogant son of a corporate titan. When his entitled cruelty went too far, Ava did the unthinkable. She threw him out. Her manager fired her on the spot, leaving her jobless and terrified. But the story doesn't end there. The next day, she wasn't served with a lawsuit, but a summons. She was called to the top floor of Sterling Tower to face the billionaire father himself. What happened next is not what you think. It's a story about integrity, power, and an offer that came from 2,000 feet in the air. The Gilded Spoon wasn't just a restaurant. It was a theater. Located in the heart of Boston's Back Bay, it prided itself on an ambiance of approachable luxury. This meant the chandeliers were genuine crystal but dimmed just enough not to feel ostentatious. The cutlery was silver heavy in the hand, but the menu forewent impenetrable French for artisanal American descriptions. It was a place where old money families celebrated quiet anniversaries and new tech money millionaires closed deals over $300 bottles of Cabernet. For the staff, it was a different kind of theater, a nightly performance of deference, grace, and invisibility. Ava Mitchell was one of its star performers, though she'd never get a curtain call. At 24, she moved with an efficiency that belied her exhaustion. Her smile was a well-practiced mask hiding the relentless hum of anxiety that was the soundtrack to her life. Every tip she earned was mentally allocated before it even hit the shared jar, a fraction for rent on her tiny North End apartment, a slice for the mountain of her sister's medical bills, and a sliver for the instant noodles that constituted most of her diet. She was a ghost in this gilded cage, haunting the periphery of other people's opulent lives, serving them slices of a world she could never afford to taste. Tonight, the air was thicker than usual. A Tuesday, normally a sedate affair, was crackling with a nervous energy. The source was Table 7, a prime corner booth occupied by Preston Sterling Jr. and his coterie of sycophants. Ava knew the type. She'd served them 100 times before. They were young men who wore their father's wealth like an ill-fitting suit, constantly adjusting it, showing it off, terrified it might slip off and reveal the unremarkable person beneath. Preston Jr. was the archetype. With a jaw that seemed permanently clenched in a sneer and eyes that swept over the staff as if they were part of the furniture, he radiated an aura of impatient, unearned authority. He had sent back his steak twice, the first time, offensively medium rare, the second tragically overdone, before settling on the third, which he then proceeded to ignore as he held court. Ava wasn't serving his table directly. That misfortune fell to Isabella Rossi, a new hire barely 19 years old. Isabella was still in the deer-in-the-headlights phase of her waitressing career. She was sweet, timid, and desperately eager to please, making her the perfect prey. From across the bustling floor, Ava watched the scene unfold with a growing sense of dread. She saw Preston snap his fingers to get Isabella's attention, a sound that cut through the clinking of glasses and low hum of conversation like a whip crack. She saw the condescending way he spoke to her, leaning in close, his voice a low drawl that made Isabella flinch. His friends laughed, a chorus of braying hyenas. "Sweetheart," Ava overheard him say as she passed by to deliver a breadbasket, another bottle of the '09 Lafitte. "And try not to trip over your own feet this time, all right? It's distracting." Isabella's face flushed a deep crimson. "Yes, sir. Right away, sir," she stammered, scurrying away toward the wine cellar. Ava caught her eye in the kitchen a few minutes later. Isabella was leaning against the stainless steel counter, her shoulders trembling slightly. "Hey," Ava said softly, placing a hand on her arm. "You okay? Don't let them get to you. They're just spoiled children in expensive suits." Isabella looked up, her eyes watery. He makes me feel so small. He keeps asking me if I'm on the menu. One of his friends tried to get my number. I don't know what to do." A cold knot formed in Ava's stomach. It was an old, familiar feeling. It was the anger of helplessness, the rage of injustice. She knew she should tell her to report it to Mr. Henderson, the restaurant manager. But she also knew what Henderson would do: nothing. Henderson's philosophy was simple. The customer is always right, especially when their credit card has no limit. Complaining would only get Isabella labeled as a troublemaker. Just keep your head down for now. Ava advised, though the words tasted like ash in her mouth. They'll be gone in an hour. I'll keep an eye on them. If he tries anything, you look at me. She gave Isabella's arm a reassuring squeeze and went back to the floor, her own smile feeling tighter, more brittle than before. Her focus was now split. With one part of her mind, she attended to her own tables, flawlessly reciting the specials, refilling water glasses, and inquiring if the pan-seared scallops were to their liking. With the other, she was a sentinel, her gaze constantly drifting back to table 7. The group was getting louder, their laughter more obnoxious. Preston Jr. was now holding a wine glass by the bowl, a cardinal sin in a place like this, swirling the deep red liquid with aggressive carelessness. He was telling a story, his voice rising, punctuated by the raucous laughter of his friends. Isabella approached the table cautiously to clear some empty plates. As she reached across for a side dish, Preston Jr. casually, deliberately rested his hand on the small of her back. It was a gesture meant to look innocuous, a simple touch. But Ava saw it for what it was. She saw the way his fingers pressed into Isabella's uniform. She saw the way Isabella froze for a split second, her entire body going rigid. She saw the panic flash in the young girl's eyes before she quickly snatched the plate and retreated, her movements jerky and frightened. That was it. That was the line. For Ava, the world seemed to slow down. The clatter of the restaurant faded into a dull roar. All she could see was Isabella's terrified face and Preston Sterling Jr., his smug, self-satisfied smirk as he turned back to his friends, basking in their approval. In that moment, the carefully constructed walls of her professional deference crumbled into dust. The exhaustion, the anxiety, the constant swallowing of pride for a handful of dollars, it all coalesced into a single point of cold, hard clarity. Not tonight, not to her. She placed the water pitcher she was holding onto a nearby service stand with a quiet, definitive click. She straightened her apron, took a deep breath, and began to walk toward table 7. She wasn't a waitress anymore. She was a storm-gathering force, and she was about to make landfall. Ava's footsteps were soundless on the plush carpet, but her approach seemed to carry its own weight. A few diners at nearby tables, sensing a shift in the room's energy, glanced up from their meals. As she neared table 7, one of Preston Jr.'s friends noticed her and nudged him. Preston looked up, his expression one of mild annoyance, as if a fly were buzzing too close to his wine. "What is it now?" he sighed, not bothering to make eye contact. "Did you forget to chill the forks? Is that the latest crisis?" Ava stopped directly beside him, her posture ramrod straight. She didn't look at his friends. She didn't look at the half-eaten food or the expensive wine. She looked directly at him, her gaze level and unwavering. "You need to leave," she said. Her voice was low, devoid of any of the forced warmth her job demanded. It was flat, cold, and absolute. The statement hung in the air for a moment. Preston Jr. blinked, then a slow, incredulous smile spread across his face. He let out a short, barking laugh. His friends followed suit, a beat behind him, their laughter uncertain. "I'm sorry," he said, turning in his seat to face her fully, his smile turning into a sneer. "I must have misheard you. It sounded like you, the help, were giving me the customer an order. Did I get that right?" "You heard me perfectly," Ava replied, her voice remaining steady despite the furious pounding of her heart. "Your behavior towards my colleague has been inappropriate and unwelcome. You just touched her without her consent. That is unacceptable in this or any establishment. Your bill will be taken care of. Now please get up and leave." The table fell silent. The amusement in Preston Jr.'s eyes vanished, replaced by a flash of disbelief, then pure, unadulterated rage. His face darkened, the blood rising to his cheeks. "Who in the hell do you think you are?" he hissed, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper. He started to rise from his seat, using his size to try and intimidate her. He was a good head taller, But Ava didn't flinch. She stood her ground, a small, immovable object against a wave of petulant fury. "I'm the person telling you to get out," she repeated. The commotion had now attracted the attention of the entire dining room. Conversations dwindled as dozens of eyes turned toward the unfolding drama. And more importantly, it had attracted the attention of Mr. Henderson. The manager scurried over, his face pale and beaded with sweat. He was a man who lived in mortal terror of bad Yelp reviews and displeased patrons. A scene like this was his worst nightmare made manifest. "Is there a problem here?" Mr. Sterling Henderson asked, his voice a high-pitched sycophantic whine. He shot a furious glare at Ava. "What is going on?" "There's a problem, all right, Preston Jr.," spat his finger, jabbing in Ava's direction. "Your waitress here has lost her mind. She's ordering me to leave." "Me." Henderson's face went from pale to ashen. He turned on Ava, his eyes wide with panic. "Ava, apologize to Mr. Sterling immediately. What is the meaning of this insubordination, Mr. Henderson?" Ava said, her voice still calm and measured, a stark contrast to the manager's frantic squeaking. "Mr. Sterling has been harassing Isabella all evening. I just witnessed him put his hands on her. It is our policy and our duty to ensure a safe work environment." "She's lying!" "Preston Jr.," roared his voice, now loud enough to make people at the back of the restaurant jump. "I barely touched her. This is insane. I want her fired. Not tomorrow. Right now, in front of me." Henderson wrung his hands, his gaze darting between the furious red-faced son of a billionaire and the impossibly calm waitress. He knew Ava. She was his best employee, reliable professional, never caused a stir. But he also knew the name Sterling. Sterling Dynamics was a titan of industry in Boston. Preston Sterling Sr. was a legend, a man who could buy and sell this entire city block without checking his bank balance. The choice in his mind wasn't a choice at all. It was a matter of survival. Ava Henderson said, his voice pleading, "You are mistaken. You must have misunderstood the situation. Now please apologize to the gentleman and go back to your station." Ava looked at her manager. She saw the fear in his eyes, the complete abdication of his responsibility, the pathetic willingness to sacrifice a young girl's dignity for the sake of a rich man's bill. And any lingering doubt she might have had about what she was doing evaporated. "No," she said. The word was quiet, but it echoed with finality. She turned her gaze back to Preston Jr. "I will not apologize for protecting my co-worker, and I will not serve a man who treats women like objects. You have 1 minute to leave, or I will call the police." That was the final straw. Preston Jr.'s face contorted into a mask of pure fury. He lunged forward, not at Ava, but at the table. With a sweep of his arm, he sent glasses, plates, and the half-empty bottle of wine crashing to the floor. Red wine splattered across the white tablecloth and the expensive carpet like a crime scene. A woman at the next table gasped. "You're finished!" he screamed at Ava, his voice hoarse with rage. "You have no idea who my father is. By the time I'm done with you, you won't be able to get a job washing dishes in a back alley. You are nothing!" He stormed toward the exit, his friends scrambling to follow in his wake, leaving a trail of chaos and stunned silence. The entire restaurant was frozen, watching the drama's explosive finale. Mr. Henderson looked at the shattered glass, the spreading wine stain, and the horrified faces of his other patrons. His panic curdled into a cold, vicious anger, and he directed it all at the person who had caused it. He turned to Ava, his face a tight mask of fury. "Get your things," he said, his voice trembling with rage. "You're fired. Now, get out of my restaurant." Ava looked at him, then over at the kitchen entrance where Isabella was standing, her hands over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. She looked at the shocked faces of the wealthy diners, some of whom were already whispering into their phones. Then she looked back at Henderson. She felt a strange sense of calm wash over her. There was no regret. There was no fear, not yet. There was only the quiet, profound satisfaction of having done the right thing no matter the cost. Gladly, Ava said. She untied her stained apron, folded it neatly, and placed it on the service stand. Without another word, she turned her back on the wreckage of Table 7 and walked away from the Gilded Spoon for the last time. The heavy oak door swung shut behind her, muffling the frantic sounds of the theater within and leaving her alone in the sudden, shocking silence of the night. The walk home was a blur. Boston's historic streets, usually a source of comfort for Ava, felt alien and menacing. The cheerful lights of pubs and the distant sound of a siren seemed to mock her sudden unemployment. The cold night air bit at her cheeks, a harsh reminder of the reality that had just crashed down upon her. She had been fired, just like that. Her mind raced a chaotic whirlwind of panic and justification. One moment she was replaying Preston Jr.'s furious spittle-flecked face, a surge of defiant pride warming her chest. She had stood up to him. She had protected Isabella. She had drawn a line in the sand. The next moment a wave of icy dread would wash over her. How was she going to pay rent? The first of the month was just a week away. And Mia. Oh God, Mia. Mia was her younger sister, her whole world. At 17, she should have been worried about prom dresses and college applications. Instead, she was fighting a rare autoimmune disorder that required a cocktail of expensive medications and regular grueling treatments. Their parents had passed away in a car accident 5 years ago, leaving Ava, then just 19, as Mia's legal guardian. The weight of that responsibility was a physical presence, a constant pressure on her shoulders. The job at the Gilded Spoon, with its decent tips on good nights, was their lifeline. And she had just severed it. When she finally reached their small apartment, the smell of burnt toast and cinnamon hung in the air. Mia was sitting at their tiny kitchen table, a textbook open in front of her, though her focus was on the slightly charred piece of bread in her hand. She looked up as Ava entered, her face, usually pale, breaking into a wide, warm smile that always made Ava's heart ache. "You're home early," Mia said, her voice bright. "Did the rich people finally run out of things to complain about?" Ava forced a smile, dropping her keys into the ceramic bowl by the door. Something like that. She couldn't bring herself to tell Mia the truth. Not yet. She couldn't bear to see that bright smile crumble. "I tried to make cinnamon toast," Mia announced proudly, gesturing to her creation. "It's a little crispy. But I think I'm getting the hang of the toaster's volcano setting." Ava managed a small laugh, the sound feeling foreign in her throat. She sat down opposite her sister, picking at a loose thread on the worn tablecloth. The weight of her secret felt immense. "How was your day?" "Did Dr. Peterson call back about the new prescription?" Ava asked, desperate to deflect. "Yep. It's ready to pick up tomorrow." She said this one might have fewer side effects, so fingers crossed. "I don't get the zombie brain this time," Mia said cheerfully. Then her smile softened as she studied Ava's face. "Hey, are you okay? You look, I don't know, like you just wrestled a bear and lost." Ava tried to wave it off. "Just a long night. One of the customers was a real piece of work." That was the understatement of the century. They talked for a little while longer about Mia's online classes, about a funny show they were watching, about anything and everything except the ticking time bomb of their financial situation. Eventually, Mia, fatigued from her studies, went to bed, leaving Ava alone in the quiet apartment with her spiraling thoughts. Sleep was impossible. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Henderson's furious face or Preston Jr.'s threat echoing in her ears. "You won't be able to get a job washing dishes in a back alley." Was he right? The Sterling name carried immense weight in this city. A word from him could blacklist her from the entire hospitality industry. Panic, cold and sharp, clawed at her throat. She spent the night staring at the ceiling, watching the headlights of passing cars dance across it, each one feeling like a searchlight seeking her out. The next 2 days were a special kind of hell. Ava scoured online job boards, her stomach sinking with every listing. Minimum 3 years fine dining experience required. References will be checked. Her only professional reference was Mr. Henderson, a man who now likely despised her. She sent out a dozen applications for jobs at diners and coffee shops, feeling a fresh wave of humiliation with each click of the submit button. Her phone buzzed constantly with texts from former coworkers. Some offered support and admiration. "You're a hero," Ava one read. Others were more cautious, relaying the gossip. Henderson had told everyone she'd had a complete psychotic breakdown. Isabella had texted a long, tearful message thanking her profusely, but also admitting she was terrified of losing her own job. On the third morning, as Ava was nursing a cup of cheap coffee and trying to work up the courage to call a temp agency, an email landed in her inbox. The subject line was stark and official. Meeting request. Office of Preston Sterling Sr. Ava's blood ran cold. The sender was an executive assistant from Sterling Dynamics. The body of the email was brief and devoid of any warmth. Ms. Mitchell, Mr. Preston Sterling Sr. requests your presence for a meeting at his office tomorrow Friday at 10:00 a.m. sharp. A car will be sent to your address at 9:15 a.m. to transport you to our headquarters. Please confirm your attendance. Regards, Cynthia Vance, Executive Assistant to the CEO, Sterling Dynamics. Ava read it 3 times, her hands starting to shake. This was it. This was the other shoe dropping. Preston Jr. had gone crying to his daddy, and now the Titan himself was going to finish the job. She was going to be sued, or threatened, or worse. Her mind conjured images of powerful lawyers in sharkskin suits burying her under a mountain of legal documents she could never hope to fight. A car. They were sending a car. The gesture felt less like a courtesy and more like an assertion of power. We know where you live. You cannot avoid this. Her first instinct was to ignore it, to delete the email and pretend it never happened. But she knew that was impossible. The Sterlings were not people you could ignore. Running would only make it worse. With a trembling finger, she typed out a one-word reply. Confirmed. As she hit send, she felt a profound sense of dread settle over her. She was a guppy that had, in a moment of foolish bravery, nipped at a great white shark. And now she had been summoned to the deep, dark water where the shark reigned supreme. She had no idea what was waiting for her in the lion's den, but she was certain of one thing: her life was about to change, and almost certainly not for the better. The car that arrived the next morning was exactly what Ava had expected: a black, impossibly sleek sedan with tinted windows that seemed to absorb the light around them. It purred at the curb like a panther, a silent, intimidating presence on her humble street. The driver, a man in a crisp black suit, got out and opened the rear door for her without a word, his expression as impassive as the car's chrome grille. The ride to the financial district was silent. Ava sat on the plush leather seat, her hands clenched in her lap, watching the familiar streets of her city glide by through the dark glass. They looked different from this vantage point, like scenes from a movie she wasn't a part of. The world outside was for ordinary people. She was being transported to another realm, a place of power and consequence she had only ever read about. Sterling Tower was a monument to wealth and influence. It was a spear of smoked glass and polished steel that pierced the Boston skyline, casting a long shadow over the historic buildings below. As Ava walked through the cavernous lobby, the sound of her worn-out flats was swallowed by the acres of gleaming marble. The air was cool and still, smelling faintly of money and air conditioning. Men and women in impeccably tailored suits moved with quiet, purposeful strides, their faces set with a uniform seriousness. No one looked at her, yet she felt intensely, painfully visible. A severe-looking woman at the reception desk checked her name on a list and directed her to a private elevator. "The top floor," she said, her tone implying Ava should already know. "Mr. Sterling is expecting you." The elevator ride was a silent, stomach-lurching ascent. There were no buttons to press. A keycard had already selected her destination. The doors opened directly into a reception area that was larger than Ava's entire apartment. A woman with a sleek blonde bob and a headset, Cynthia Vance, Ava presumed, greeted her with a cool, professional smile. "Ms. Mitchell, right on time. Mr. Sterling will see you now." She led Ava to a pair of massive mahogany doors and pushed one open, gesturing for her to enter. Ava stepped inside and the doors clicked shut behind her, the sound echoing with a heavy finality. The office was breathtaking. One entire wall was a floor-to-ceiling window offering a panoramic, godlike view of the city and the harbor beyond. The desk was a vast expanse of dark polished wood, uncluttered save for a sleek monitor and a single ornate pen. The air smelled of old leather and something else, an indefinable scent of power. And behind the desk, standing and looking out the window, was the man himself, Preston Sterling Sr. He was older than Ava had imagined from the few photos she'd seen online. His hair was a distinguished silver, his shoulders broad under a perfectly tailored gray suit. When he turned to face her, she was struck by his eyes. They were a pale, piercing blue, and they regarded her with an unnerving, analytical intensity. There was none of his son's petulant fire in them. There was something far more formidable, a calm, calculated intelligence. "This was the lion. Ms. Mitchell," he said. His voice was a deep, quiet baritone that commanded attention without needing to be raised. "Thank you for coming. Please have a seat." He gestured to one of the two leather chairs facing his desk. Ava's legs felt like jelly as she walked over and sat down. The chair sighed as she sank into it, making her feel small and insignificant. He did not sit. Instead, he walked slowly around the desk and leaned against the front of it, crossing his arms. He was studying her, his expression unreadable. The silence stretched thick and uncomfortable. Ava's heart was hammering against her ribs, but she forced herself to meet his gaze, refusing to be the first to look away. Finally, he spoke. "I imagine you have some idea why you are here." Ava swallowed, her throat dry. "I assume it's about what happened at the Gilded Spoon on Tuesday night?" He gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. "I have of course heard my son's version of events. A rather dramatic tale of an unhinged waitress launching an unprovoked attack. He can be quite theatrical when he feels he's been wronged." Ava remained silent. This was a trap, she was sure of it. Sterling Sr. continued, his eyes never leaving her face. "However, I have also seen the security footage from the restaurant, both from the main dining room and a small camera near the kitchen entrance. The audio is poor, but the visuals are quite clear. I also had a discreet conversation with the young woman you work with. Isabella, I believe her name is." Ava's blood went cold. He had investigated. Of course he had. A man like this didn't operate on hearsay. He dealt in facts and data. He had seen everything. "So you know what happened?" Ava said, her voice barely a whisper. "I know," he confirmed, his tone, "even that my son behaved like a boorish, entitled brat. I know that he harassed your colleague. And I know that you, in defiance of your manager and at great personal risk to your own livelihood, intervened and ejected him from the establishment. I also know that you were summarily fired for your actions." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. Ava braced herself. Here it comes, she thought. The lawsuit. The threat. The crushing display of power. But what he said next completely blindsided her. "I must say, Ms. Mitchell," Preston Sterling Sr. said, a flicker of something unreadable in his pale blue eyes. "It was quite remarkable." Ava stared at him, utterly bewildered. "Remarkable?" "Yes. You displayed a quality that I have found to be in desperately short supply these days. A quality my vast fortune seems to be utterly incapable of purchasing." He pushed himself off the desk and began to pace slowly in front of the massive window. "I have spent a lifetime building this company, this empire," he said, gesturing to the city sprawling below them. "I have dealt with sharks and vultures, with governments and competitors. I understand power. I understand leverage. I understand greed. What I am having increasing difficulty understanding is character." He stopped and turned back to her. "My son Preston is my greatest failure. I have given him everything: the best schools, unlimited funds, every advantage a young man could dream of. And in doing so, I have given him nothing of value. I have created a shell, a weak, arrogant boy who believes the world owes him deference because of his last name. He has no spine, no integrity, no courage. He walked back and finally sat in the chair behind his desk, leaning forward and steepling his fingers. The full force of his intense gaze was on her. And then there's you, Ms. Mitchell. A waitress working for tips to pay, if my information is correct, for your sister's rather substantial medical care. A person for whom a steady job is not a convenience but a necessity for survival. And yet you were willing to risk it all. Not for a promotion, not for a reward, but to defend a frightened girl from the casual cruelty of a bully. You did the right thing even when it was the hardest thing. You, Ms. Mitchell, have a spine of solid steel. Ava was speechless. Her mind was reeling, unable to process the turn this conversation had taken. She had walked in here expecting to be destroyed. Instead, this powerful, intimidating man was complimenting her, praising her. She found her voice, though it was shaky. Mr. Sterling, I don't understand. Why did you call me here? He gave her a thin, wry smile. Because, Ms. Mitchell, people with spines of solid steel are an extraordinarily valuable asset, and I find myself in need of one. He leaned back in his chair, the smile fading, his expression turning serious once more. I am not going to offer you your job back. That would be an insult. I am here to make you a very different kind of offer, one that I believe you will find compelling. Ava stared at Preston Sterling Sr., her mind struggling to catch up. An offer. What kind of offer could this man possibly make her? A settlement to keep quiet, a menial job in one of his company's cafeterias. As a form of pity. Her defenses remained on high alert. A man didn't build an empire like this by being altruistic. An offer, she repeated, her voice cautious. Let me be candid. Ms. Mitchell, Sterling Sr. began leaning forward again, his gaze sharp and direct. My son's behavior was not an isolated incident. It is a pattern, one that has become increasingly problematic. His public antics, his sense of entitlement. It's a liability to the Sterling brand, to everything I've built. I have teams of lawyers and PR experts to clean up his messes, but they are treating the symptoms, not the disease. The disease is a profound lack of character, a complete disconnect from the reality that most people live in. He paused, his expression growing distant, almost pained. I have tried everything, cutting off his funds, forcing him into internships, therapy. Nothing sticks. He is insulated by a world of yes men and enablers. He has never faced a true consequence. Not really. What you did the other night. That was perhaps the first time in his adult life that someone without a vested interest in his wealth told him no and meant it. Ava listened, a strange mix of emotions swirling inside her. She felt a sliver of pity for this father who, despite his immense power, was helpless in the face of his own son's failings. But she was still wary. She was a pawn on a chessboard she didn't understand. I still don't see how this involves me, she said plainly. It involves you because you are the antithesis of the problem, he countered immediately. You are grounded. You understand consequence. You possess integrity. These are not qualities that can be taught in a business school. They are forged in adversity. He gestured vaguely at a file on his desk, which Ava sickeningly realized was probably a dossier on her entire life. I have a proposition, he continued. I am in the process of restructuring the Sterling Family Foundation, our philanthropic arm. For years, it has been little more than a tax shelter and a way to get our name on university buildings. A vanity project. I want to change that. I want it to do real tangible good. I want to establish a new grant program, a fund specifically designed to provide immediate, no-red-tape assistance to families facing catastrophic medical crises. People who, through no fault of their own, are one diagnosis away from ruin. Ava's heart gave a painful thud. He was talking about people like her and Mia. He was describing their life. The foundation has a board, of course, he went on, and a director. But they are all people from my world. They understand balance sheets and endowments, but they don't understand desperation. They don't know what it's like to choose between buying medicine and paying the heating bill. I need someone on the inside. Someone to be the program's conscience. A special projects coordinator, for lack of a better title. Someone to vet the applicants not just on paper but with genuine empathy. Someone to cut through the bureaucracy and be a fierce advocate for those in need. Someone who cannot be bought or intimidated. I want that person to be you. The air left Ava's lungs. She felt dizzy as if the room were tilting. A job. Not just a job, but a position of purpose, one that struck at the very core of her own life struggle. It was surreal. It was impossible. Me, she finally managed to say. Mr. Sterling, with all due respect, I'm a waitress. I have no experience in philanthropy or corporate administration. I don't have a college degree. You have a degree in reality, Ms. Mitchell. That is far more valuable for this role than an MBA, he said dismissively. I have a team of administrators who can handle the paperwork. I need your judgment, your character. The salary would be $150,000 a year with a full benefits package that includes some of the best private health insurance in the country. $150,000. The number was so large, so abstract, it barely registered. It was a fortune. It was a different universe. It was Mia's medications paid for without a second thought. It was the specialist she'd always wanted to see. It was a life without the constant grinding fear of financial ruin. It was everything she had ever dreamed of, and it felt like a trap. Why, Ava asked, suspicion lacing her voice. Why me? You could hire anyone. This feels like you're trying to buy my silence, to clean up your son's mess by throwing money at the problem. For the first time, a genuine smile touched Preston Sterling Sr.'s lips. It was a small, weary thing, but it reached his eyes. A fair question. And a predictable one. If you had leapt at the offer without questioning my motives, you wouldn't be the person I need for the job. He stood up and walked back to the window, his back to her. Let me be clear. This is not hush money. If you wanted to go to the press, the security footage would speak for itself. This is not about my son's reputation. Frankly, I think it could use the hit. This is about an opportunity. You, Ms. Mitchell, presented me with a very clear picture of what my family lacks. And in doing so, you presented yourself as a solution to a different problem I have. I need to know if the foundation's money is actually helping people. You can tell me. You have lived it. He turned back to face her. I understand your hesitation. This is a world you are not familiar with. It is a world that I suspect you hold in some contempt. And you are right to do so. It is filled with people like my son, but it is also a world that holds the power to enact significant change. He picked up the ornate pen from his desk, turning it over in his fingers. I am not asking for an answer right now. An offer like this requires perspective, which is why the second part of my offer is a bit more unconventional. He looked up at her, a strange glint in his eye. There is a helicopter on the roof of this building. It is scheduled to take me on a tour of some potential real estate developments up the coast. I want you to come with me. See the city, the world from a different vantage point. We can discuss the details. Ask me anything you want. No PR spin, no corporate doublespeak, just a conversation. And at the end of it, you can give me your answer. A helicopter ride. The sheer casual audacity of it was staggering. It was a power move, of course. A way to dazzle and overwhelm her with the scale of his wealth. But it was also something more. An invitation. A challenge. See the world through my eyes, it seemed to say, and then decide if you can work within it. Ava's mind was a battlefield. Her instinct screamed at her to run, that this was a deal with the devil. But the thought of Mia, of a life free from financial terror, was a powerful siren song. She had nothing to lose. She had already been fired. She was at rock bottom. The only way was up, or in this case, 2,000 feet up. She took a deep breath, the sterile air-conditioned air filling her lungs. "Okay, Mr. Sterling," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "I'll take that helicopter ride." The journey to the roof was another silent, sterile affair, this time in a small private elevator that opened onto a windswept helipad. The roar of the city below was replaced by the thrumming whump-whump-whump of the helicopter's rotor blades slowly beginning to spin. A pilot in a crisp uniform gave them a nod as they approached the sleek, dark blue helicopter, its body emblazoned with the familiar Sterling Dynamics logo. Ava had never been this close to a helicopter before. It felt like a creature from another planet, all sharp angles and powerful machinery. Sterling Sr. gestured for her to get in, and she ducked under the spinning blades, her hair whipping wildly across her face. Inside the cabin was surprisingly plush, with cream-colored leather seats and noise-canceling headsets resting on each one. As Sterling Sr. settled in opposite her, he pointed to the headset. "You'll want to wear this," he said over the increasing noise. "It makes conversation possible." Ava put on the headset, and the deafening roar of the rotors was instantly reduced to a manageable hum. She could hear his voice clear as a bell in her ears. "Ready?" he asked. She gave a nervous nod, and a moment later she felt a lurch in her stomach as the helicopter lifted off the pad. The ascent was unnervingly smooth. One moment they were on a roof, the next they were floating above it. The city of Boston unfolded beneath them like an intricate map. The familiar streets, the red brick buildings of her neighborhood, the green expanse of the common, it all shrank, becoming part of a larger, more complex tapestry. For the first few minutes, neither of them spoke. Ava was mesmerized by the view. She saw the city not as a series of streets to be navigated, of buildings to work in or live in, but as a single living organism. She could see the Gilded Spoon, a tiny, insignificant speck in the grand scheme of things. Her entire world from a few days ago was now just a dot. It was a humbling, disorienting perspective. "It's different from up here, isn't it?" Sterling Sr.'s voice crackled in her headset. "It's a lot." Ava admitted, her eyes still glued to the window. From down there, he continued, his tone reflective. "You're caught in the weeds. Worried about the next step, the next bill, the next shift. From up here, you see the patterns. The way the financial district connects to the port. The way the wealthy neighborhoods are buffered from the poorer ones. You see the whole system." Ava turned to look at him. "And you see how small everyone is." He nodded slowly. "Exactly. When you deal in billions of dollars in global logistics, it's easy to forget that the system is made up of individuals, of people like you trying to pay for your sister's medicine. That's a weakness of this perspective. It makes people forget." They flew in silence for a while longer, heading up the coast. The urban sprawl gave way to the rugged coastline of New England, the deep blue of the Atlantic dotted with white sails. The view was breathtakingly beautiful. "Tell me about your sister," he said unexpectedly. Ava was taken aback by the personal question, but she answered. She told him about Mia, about her fierce spirit and her frustratingly fragile health. She spoke of their parents, of the sudden responsibility thrust upon her, of the constant quiet fear that underpinned every decision she made. She didn't embellish or plead for sympathy. She just stated the facts of her life, her voice even. Sterling Sr. listened without interruption. When she finished, he was quiet for a long time, looking out at the endless ocean. "My wife Preston's mother. She passed away when he was 12. He said, his voice softer than she'd heard it before. "She was the heart of our family. I didn't know how to be a father without her. So I did the only thing I knew how to do. I provided. I thought that by giving him everything money could buy, I was protecting him from the harshness of the world. Instead, I trapped him in a gilded cage of my own making. He has never known a day of genuine struggle, so he has never had the chance to develop a shred of genuine strength." It was a confession Ava realized, a moment of raw, unguarded honesty from a man who probably hadn't shown any in decades. In that moment, he wasn't a billionaire titan. He was just a father mourning his own failures. That's why this foundation role is so important to me." He went on, his voice regaining its usual firmness. "It's too late for my son, perhaps, but the wealth I've created, it can still do something meaningful. It can provide for others what I failed to provide for him, not just money, but a real chance, a real safety net, built on compassion." Ava felt her own internal conflict raging. Part of her was still deeply cynical. Was this just an elaborate, expensive guilt trip? A way for a man to assuage his conscience without having to change the predatory system that made him rich in the first place? But another part of her, the part that had spent years praying for a miracle, saw a genuine opportunity. Not just to save herself and Mia, but to help hundreds, maybe thousands of other families who were in the same desperate situation. Could she really walk away from that? Could she work for a man who was part of the problem to try and create a solution? "What about your son?" Ava asked, her voice sharp. "What happens to him? If I take this job, I'm working for your family, a family that includes him. I won't be harassed or threatened." Sterling Sr.'s face hardened. "You have my word. Preston will not be a problem. He is being sent to oversee one of our more remote logistics hubs in Singapore for an indefinite period of time. He needs to learn this business from the ground up, and more importantly, he needs to be far away from the cameras and temptations of this city. He will not be a factor in your work or in your life." He was exiling his own son. The decisiveness of the action was both chilling and, Ava had to admit, reassuring. The helicopter began to bank, turning back towards the city. The sun was lower in the sky now, casting long shadows and bathing the glass towers in a golden light. It was a beautiful, intimidating sight. This was his world. He was offering her a key. She thought about the principles that had led her to get fired. Standing up for what's right, protecting the vulnerable, fighting against bullies. This job, it was a chance to do all of that, but on a scale she could never have imagined. Instead of protecting one coworker on one night, she could protect countless families for years to come. It would mean entering the lion's den not as prey, but as a handler. It was a dangerous, complicated path filled with moral compromises she hadn't yet foreseen. But when she looked down at the sprawling city, she no longer saw an intimidating system. She saw millions of little lights, millions of homes, millions of people like her and Mia hoping for a break, praying for a lifeline. The helicopter began its descent, the helipad on top of Sterling Tower growing larger. The decision, which had seemed so impossible an hour ago, now felt clear. It was a terrifying, audacious, and perhaps foolish choice. But it was the only one she could make. As the landing skids touched down with a gentle bump, she turned to the man opposite her. "Mr. Sterling," Ava said, her voice firm and clear in his headset. "I have some terms, but if you can agree to them, then I accept your offer." Preston Sterling Sr. raised an eyebrow as the helicopter's rotors wound down. He had expected gratitude, not a negotiation. Terms? Ava met his gaze unintimidated. "Yes, 3 of them," she stated firmly. "First, Isabella Rossi's job is protected. She gets a raise and your company pays for harassment training for the restaurant's management. Second, the medical foundation I'll be running must have a guaranteed protected budget, and I will have final say on disbursements. It won't be a PR stunt. Third, I want to meet your son before he leaves." The last term surprised him. "Why?" "He needs to face a real consequence," Ava explained. "He needs to see me not as a waitress he dismissed, but as the person whose life was changed by his actions. It's not for revenge. It's the only way he might actually learn something." Sterling Sr. studied her for a long moment, a look of genuine respect on his face. "Consider your terms met, Ms. Mitchell." The meeting with Preston Jr. was held in a sterile conference room. He was slumped in a chair, sullen and resentful. "Come to gloat before you take your blood money," he sneered. "It's not blood money," Ava said calmly. "I'm here to make sure you understand something. Your father offered me a job that will change my life, and it happened for one reason, because you are a bully and I refuse to let you get away with it. Your cruelty is the foundation of my good fortune. I want you to remember that while you're in Singapore. That is your consequence." For the first time, his arrogant facade cracked, replaced by stunned silence. Ava stood and walked out of the room without looking back. Her new life began the following Monday. Her office at the Sterling Family Foundation had a stunning view, and while she initially felt like an imposter in her simple clothes, that feeling vanished when she opened the first case file. It was the story of a family on the brink of ruin trying to pay for their child's leukemia treatment. Reading their desperate letter, Ava knew she was exactly where she needed to be. This was real. This was the purpose. She picked up the phone and began making the calls that would change their lives, armed with the resources she had always lacked and the empathy she had never lost. A few weeks later, a bouquet of flowers arrived at her office. The card was from Isabella. It read, "Thank you for showing me what courage looks like. P.S. Watching Mr. Henderson sit through his harassment training was glorious." Ava smiled, placing the card on her desk. It was a daily reminder of her journey and of the simple truth that had brought her here, that profound power lies not in wealth, but in a spine made of solid, unbreakable steel. That single act of defiance in a high-end restaurant didn't just cost Ava her job. It catapulted her into a world she never knew existed. It proves that character is a currency that can be more valuable than money, and integrity can command the attention of even the most powerful people. Ava's story is a powerful reminder that you never know who is watching, and that doing the right thing, especially when it's hard, can open doors you never dreamed were there. She didn't just get a new job, she found her purpose, all because she refused to stand by and do nothing. What do you think? Did Ava make the right choice by accepting the job? Was Preston Sterling Sr. truly trying to do good, or was it all just a clever move to manage his family's image? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story moved you, please hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories that will inspire and surprise you.